Did you say hi to people in the chats?
Nope, I
Oh,
didn't have time.
hello, Matt. Hi, Sarah. How are you guys doing? So glad you guys are here tonight. I hope you had a good day at work, the both of you. Did you have a good day, Sarah? I hope so. Ooh, a work party. That can be fun or not, depending on who, depending on who you work with. Because I've had some that was like, I didn't want to party with them. Then I've had some that were like real fun. When I worked at the law office, that was one of the funnest places to party. Lawyers know how to have a good time. Oh, I'm glad. I'm sorry, Matt. Yeah, 12 and a half hour shift. That does not sound like fun at all, dude. I'm so sorry. That is not fun. Oh, yikes. Yeah, oof. Those days are long gone. I don't know why, but I'm working just as hard at YouTube any more than I did at my jobs. You think it's going to be easy and it's not. That's okay because I love it. I love doing research. Sometimes I go down the rabbit hole though. Yep,
Not not
it can.
not just sometimes.
Okay, Doc, I know. I don't mean to. It's just, you find something and then the next thing you know, it's like, ooh, I wonder about that. And then that leads to another question. And before you know it, you've lost an hour or two or three. But, you gain knowledge. So, hey, got to go with that. Well, I don't know where everybody is, but we'll go ahead and get started. I don't know if you guys know that there's a YouTube channel. It's called the creator is called Valhalla Awaits. He has a goat farm. So I was watching goats right before we came on. What can I say? It's peaceful. He's got baby goats now. So he puts them up they're in a special thing and he keeps a camera on them. And at night it turns to, night vision. So it's kind of fun.
You hear all you hear in the background is goats because she's not got the picture on her laptop. It's just the sounds is so they're you know
Well, and then the chickens. The chickens were
yeah, the
making
chickens
the
too.
chickens were making a lot of noise today. But they had a new baby born today, so it got put in the special um it's not really a part of the barn where they keep the babies and the mamas. And so they already had one, Cece, she had a baby this week. And so now another one had a baby, Bella. Bella had her baby. So they've got two little baby goats and they're so cute. Of course, Paula's like, I want a goat. It's like, honey, you got 3 or 4 cats, a Labrador, and you love your frogs and, your turtles. I think you got enough stuff. No more. But don't tell her I said that because she loves animals. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. And no, I agree. If I had the land, it would be very scary with what we would have. And Doc knows it because he lets me bring things home that I don't need to bring home. But I can't help it. See, we do the TNR with cats, which is trap, neuter, release. And I can do it really well until it's a kitten. And then I can't release it. And that's why we have 4 right now in the house, 4 cats, because they were all little. See, listen
Why
to him.
say
And
nothing?
the 2 gray ones are so in love with him. It is ridiculous. They think he is the best. They want to lay on top of him and cuddle with him. It is hilarious. In fact, the one, we call her the assassin, the Russian assassin. She won't have not much to do with me because she's all about her daddy.
Yeah, but Sky gets up in front of my monitor. She won't lay on me.
She does once in a while.
She wants
Yeah.
to her head petted, but she wants to be in front of everything.
Yeah.
So
Well, Rogue's the one that likes to lay on you.
yep.
But it's fun. So let's get started and we'll see what we got going. So, greetings to our truth seekers and justice warriors. I'm your storyteller in the wilderness of injustice, and my ride and die doc is standing shotgun as we navigate the darkness where the predators have hunted for over 500 years. That's a clue. There's Vala.
Man, now I feel old.
Well, you know, us vampires, we live a long time.
Uh-huh.
And the system was designed to fail. You see, I've become a storyteller because our history is being diminished and even whitewashed. And you know what they say, if you don't learn your history and remember it, you're bound to repeat it. And they don't teach you in school that Christopher Columbus wrote about selling 9 and 10-year-old Indigenous girls for sexual slavery. They don't tell you that what started in 1492 never stopped. It just got hidden behind the terms like runaway and prostitute when we talk about missing Indigenous women. The history books have erased these voices. So now we must be the ones to amplify them, you guys. We got to tell the stories. And we're ready to shine a light on the stories that society has spent centuries trying to bury. Stories like Eva's, a 13-year-old Navajo girl who was trafficked for 2 years while everyone looked the other way. Stories like Lakota Renville, whose brutal murder remains unsolved nearly 20 years later. And stories like Sara Martinez, she's still missing, but the police are calling her an adult runaway at 17. So this isn't a show for the children. This is for us adults. And it's for us to know what's going on out there and so that we can share it. So when the colonizers write history, the colonized become invisible. And when the system is designed to ignore your Indigenous women, they disappear twice, is what one of the women said. Once in your life and once in the records. And that's why storytellers like us exist, to make visible what was meant to stay hidden. Hey, Ken, glad you joined us, darling. So buckle up. The path ahead grows bumpy as we lead you through this nightmare they call the justice system. Trying to erase everything having to do with slavery. We need to remember that we did it so. Exactly. It needs to be remembered. I mean, we personally didn't do it. It's not like they want you to feel, they say little kids feel bad. Why? They need to know history. If you go way back from the beginning, people have fought, warred, and committed. They had slaves of the Indigenous people before they ever brought over any of the African people.
That's the beginnings of your population not having the truth anymore. You know, you don't teach the children. You know, they're going to grow up to be, you know, adults, and then
Holocaust deniers.
Yeah.
Oh, that never happened. Yeah, it did. A lot of things happen, and we need to know. And there's a lot of good things too. I mean, they're wiping that away too. The things that, you know, people created. And sorry, I have a hair on my lipstick, and that was just driving me bonkers. But when we think of human trafficking, guys, many of us picture this dramatic scenario from Hollywood movies, Liam Neeson. But the reality is far more insidious, and it's happening right here in our communities today. We're diving into a crime that affects an estimated 50 million people globally, yet remains largely hidden in plain sight. The voices of survivors, what they want you to know, on the real reality of exploitation, as far as I'm concerned, this is one of the survivors, as far as I'm concerned, all prostitution is rape. After you get into prostitution, you get used to it. It's like using the bathroom. You don't think about it after a while. It takes all of your feeling of being a woman away. Prostitution is dangerous. It's like suicide. Hey, William. Hey, we're glad you're here. Oh, teenage buttheads. Yeah, they can be that. But on how society views them, when a man looks at a prostitute and a native woman, He looks at them the same way, dirty. I wouldn't say there are pimps anymore. Now they're all boyfriends. And we're going to explain that. On survival, there are times I'd walk around in a spaced out, because when I stop and think about the reality, I break down and I can't handle it. On what they need, women like myself need someone they feel that they can trust without being judged by how they lived their life. We didn't wake up and choose to become a whore or a hooker or a hoe, as they call us. We need someone to understand where we came from, how we lived, and that half of us were aped, graped, beaten, and made to sell our bodies. We need people with hearts. So on cultural healing, you guys, back then, I was not connected, she said, to my cultural identity. And that happens a lot to some of the young Native women. She says, I thought prostitution was normal living. My auntie tried to help me. She would talk to me, take me to the sweats. My culture doesn't put you around drugs or alcohol. It teaches you different values. It gives you belonging and faith. And they've lost that. But now we're going to talk about Eva. And she's a 13-year-old who disappeared in plain sight. Nope, we're good. Eva is 13. Or yeah, you can go ahead and... I don't know, babe. I didn't get my pictures done like I should have. So Eva's 13, living between relatives on a Navajo reservation. Her mom is struggling with alcoholism. Her stepfather is abusing both her and her sister, but they're too scared to tell. Then Eva gets a Facebook message. I remember you from middle school. The digital grooming process. The guy calls himself D. He has a thick brow and a round jaw. Eva doesn't remember him, but on the reservation, everybody knows everyone, or they pretend they do. D starts love bombing her, compliments her eyes, her dimples, her braids. He asks for photos. Eve sends selfies, then intimate pictures. She drives to his home. Remember, she's 13 years old, you guys, propped up on blankets to see over the steering wheel because mom's too drunk to drive her. The trap closes because Dee records everything. Videos of her performing oral sex. Then the threats start. I'll post these on Facebook. I'll hurt your little sister. He brings other men, claiming that they're his brother and cousin. They grape Eva. She tries to fight back once and punches one of them. Just do it, someone says before they overpower her. System failure in action. Eva showed every classic trafficking sign there was. Constantly reported missing. She was malnourished. She was bruised. She was anxious, depressed, mute, no sense of time. She had contact with the police multiple times, healthcare workers, social services. Not once, not one time did anyone screen her for trafficking. She says, nobody saw me, not until the very end. And the statistics that explain everything, the Native Americans are 11% of New Mexico's population, but are 25% of the trafficking victims in New Mexico. Federal prosecutors in New Mexico declined 69% of general cases and 80% of child abuse cases. That's the prosecutors, the ones that's supposed to be on the side of the people. The result, 0 charges were filed against Eva's traffickers. Now, case study number 2. And we can go to the next picture. The trafficking to murder pipeline. Lakota Renville. Oh, okay. I'll explain this before we get there. This is, Canada put this out as one of their programs because they wanted people to remember that human trafficking isn't what we think. It's not always that white van that pulls up and someone pulls you inside and off you go. It doesn't always happen that way. And so this is what they did to tell people, hey, know the facts, learn the facts. Let's go to the next picture. That should be Lakota. Now, this was in 2005 when runaway becomes murder. She was 22 years old. She was a shy member of the Sistiton. Oh, I'm not even going to try it, but one of the Sioux tribes. I'm not going to brutalize the tribe's name, so forgive me. Met a man online, and so she moved from South Dakota to Kansas City in 2004, away from her family. The man immediately started selling her, trafficking her, sending her out to meet clients. He would take away her clothes, tie her up in the basement for 3 days. On October 16th, her brutally beaten, stabbed body was found wrapped in carpet padding and dumped in a vacant lot. Police focus on her being a prostitute rather than a trafficking victim. Hey, Tracy, the alternate point of view. She was a problem today when we watched trials. She always has to take the opposite side, and she's always wrong. But we like her, so be nice to her, okay? So they're focusing on Lakota being a prostitute instead of a trafficking victim. And nearly 20 years later, her case remains unsolved. Now, they say supposedly they're going to start looking at it again. I know I'm a problem because I'm always right, Tracy. It's okay, honey. We'll get you in a support group. She'll get me for that later. Moo, stop walking around. She's being naughty. So now this girl, Natalie Cramer, in 2022, she's not Native, but her case is really going to coincide with a Native girl that's happening right now. So I wanted to tell her story. And this was a complete system failure that almost killed her. She was 15 years old, and she disappeared from a Dallas Mavericks game, you guys. She came to the game with her dad. They had seats right under, what are the seats, Doc, or where you pay a lot of money, where you have you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, courtside.
No, up above when they,
yeah. The box.
Yes.
The media boxes.
Thanks, Matt. The boxes. Yeah. So they were right below the box seats, and she had to go to the restroom. Well, she was 15 years old. Her dad's like, okay. And then she didn't come back. And she said that at the time she was feeling anxious, and she smoked a little pot, and she was a little stressed. And so she ran into this guy and she asked him if he smoked. And he was like, yeah, hey, come on, we'll go outside and we'll smoke. And then you can, because he'd asked, are you here with anyone? She goes, oh, my dad, he's back with the seats. And so he's like, okay, well, why don't you, go ahead and come out, and then you can meet up with your dad later. And she was like, okay, that sounds great. So she followed him out. And her father said at the time when she didn't come back, he was panicking. And he got a hold of the security. There was a Dallas police officer there that was not on duty, but he was there for the game. And so they started looking for her, and they couldn't find her. Well, they got the videotapes, and they saw that this guy, the minute she left the seat, this guy left the box seats and started following her. Well, Moo, get out from behind there. You're going to get yourself in trouble, little girl. Moo.
Moo.
She's messing with the lights. But while in the parking lot, they raped her multiple times because it wasn't just him. He had a friend with him. And she said she knew when she got out there, she goes, I knew I was in trouble, but I didn't know how to get out of it. Well, her parents, because they were in Dallas, they lived outside Dallas. And they went to Dallas, and because they were in Dallas, they wanted to file a police report. Normal, right? But the police department said, no, you need to go file that where you live in your hometown instead of, doing it right there where she was taken. Because they had decided right away she was a runaway. And this caused a delay. And it's a wonder she didn't end up dead because of this delay. And her mother even told her husband, she says, "Why are you doing this?" She says, "If we lived in Houston or another state, you're telling me they'd tell you to go take care of it there?" So after a day or so, they got a hold of a private investigator because the police weren't a lot of help at the time. So the private investigator got online and he found their daughter within 24 hours. And the police should have done this. And he found her on a site where she was being sold. She was up in Oklahoma. They had got her all the way up there. And she said that, it was a terrifying experience. And she says, "I don't know why I didn't try and reach out to anybody, when there were times she thought maybe she could have." But the biggest thing when these girls are trafficked, what they start doing right away after abusing them horrendously is they drug them and they get you hooked on things. And once you're hooked on things, you don't think anybody cares anymore. Your self-esteem's gone. They're making you do vile things. But this is going to lead into the girl that happened in Fort Worth. And this is Sara Martinez, who disappeared in December of 2024. And this is history repeating itself, you guys, because Fort Worth is part of right next to Dallas, right? She's a 17-year-old Native American, Navajo, and Hispanic girl. And she disappeared from her Fort Worth home on December 28th of 2024. Now, there are some suspicious circumstances and trafficking concerns because they saw through a camera that her daughter had left. I think it was around 3 a.m. and there appears to be a guy across the street on a cell phone. But the Fort Worth police are treating Sara as an adult runaway rather than a person in potential danger. So I have some words for the Dallas and the Fort Worth Police Department. Do your job. You're supposed to be looking out for these young girls. Just because they did something perhaps stupid, like going to meet a friend that has friended them, through social media, or the one girl thought, I'll go out and smoke a joint or whatever, and they get themselves in trouble. That still is trafficking. Minors cannot consent. Hey, Trial TV Live. Hey, the squeege of justice is here. Yay! Glad you're here. So we have these two girls, very similar stories. It's just wrong, but there's a pattern. Lakota, she was dismissed. Oh, she's a prostitute. She was found murdered. We're not going to worry about it. Natalie was treated as a runaway. Her parents had to hire a private detective to save her. Sara is being treated as an adult runaway. We don't know if she's been trafficked. We don't know her fate. Her mother has had to hire a private investigator. I'm hoping they find some answers. She's been missing since December. She's a beautiful young lady. She needs to come home. Some of the statistics, I like my stats, people. And it's going to shock some of you, but there are 50 million people currently being trafficked. That's worldwide. Okay? In 2021 alone, there were 10,359 trafficking situations that were reported to the U.S. National Human Trafficking Hotline. Those are just the ones reported. And they involved over 16,554 individual victims. Now, the reason we say these are the numbers just reported, because at one time, I think the stat I found was in 2016, they said there were over 6,000 missing Indigenous Native women here in the States, but they only had 288 that were reported, or they had on the forms, but over 6,000. So that they had probably been reported and they just weren't taking it. You're going to send me the terrorist? I don't know. Riley's pretty attached to you, honey. He ain't going to come. I know that. He's going to stay with his mama. So these numbers are only representing a very fraction of the actual problem. There's 50 to 80% of identified trafficking victims have been involved with child welfare at some point in their life. Native American women are 40% of the sex trafficking survivors in some regions, despite being less than 10% of the population. Hawaii has 85 known sex traffickers. 85, with 59% of one center's clients being trafficking victims. 71% of trafficking victims in Hawaii are children under 19. So the native Hawaiian children, that's scary. But then you have to talk about the hidden male victims, because up to 50% of sex trafficked youth are male, contradicting public perception, because everybody always thinks of sex trafficking, it's a female thing. No, it's not. In fact, Lissa Yellowbird Chase, who is the one that goes out looking for these young people and older people that are missing, she informed us that actually they usually get more for a boy. And she says there are a lot more boys missing than even women. So in a nationally representative study of 20,000 high school students, 3.5% who reported being trafficked for sex. 67.9% were adolescent boys. 36% of child trafficking victims caught up in the U.S. sex industry are boys. 36%, you guys. In Massachusetts alone, more than 411 boys have been referred to the State Department of Children and Families since 2018 for concerns they were victims of commercial sex exploitation. Boys and young men of color, as well as gay, bisexual, transgender males, are disproportionately impacted by sex trafficking. Now, with Native and Indigenous people, a lot of times with a transgender person, they will say they're two spirits. They're a two-spirit person. And they are also huge victims. 11.79% of those with severe physical disabilities experience sex trafficking, compared to 2.4% of those without severe physical disability. Autistic kids are huge victims, unfortunately. So the forgotten LGBTQ plus and the two-spirit community, 50% of transgender women have traded sex for income, according to the U.S. Transgender Survey. Transgender people are over 4 times more likely than cisgender people to experience violent victimization. 60% of transgender people in Thailand face discrimination when applying for a job, and that makes them even more vulnerable to traffickers. 30% of trans adults have experienced homelessness in their lives. Now, the two-spirit people, Native Americans with both feminine and masculine spirits, they say, face additional risk due to colonization that marginalizes them based on their intersecting racial, ethnic, gender, and sexual identities. And also, they have some older men in the community that do not believe in that, and they abuse them also. So 57% of transgender people admit to being uncomfortable asking police for help, leading to massive underreporting. And now we know that they have a huge target on their back in this country. And they're not going to come forward. They're going to be those victims that end up slipping away, and no one will know. But we're going to put a spotlight on it, and we're going to tell people about it, because these kids need someone to stand up for them. But let's debunk the Hollywood myths. You know, what people think versus reality. Myth. Trafficking always involves kidnapping and physical force. The reality, most traffickers use psychological manipulation, fraud, and coercion. Another myth, only foreign nationals get trafficked in the U.S. Yeah, reality, U.S. citizens, including children, are frequently trafficked within their communities. And that doesn't mean they end up in another country. Sometimes they're in the same town and they're hidden from their families. Sometimes they're in the next state or a few states away. We don't know. Myth, victims are always held captive and can't leave. The reality, Many victims live at home. They go to school and appear to move freely, but are psychologically controlled. Now, that can be by drug use. That can be by threats that they're told that, we will harm your parents, we will harm your family. And so they are controlled. Another myth, it only happens in underground industries. Trafficking occurs in legal businesses, restaurants, hotels, construction, and agricultural. Because there's also labor trafficking, where people get trafficked to work. So the recruitment process, how traffickers operate, you guys, is trust and dependency, then control. Now, too many people equate human trafficking with kidnappings and strangers in the white van. But the executive director of the Canadian Center for Inhuman Trafficking said, in reality, it often starts with someone the victim knows and trusts. If Canadians don't unlearn these myths, they risk missing the real signs. So traffickers typically target people they know. Hey, Ben, glad you joined us. So family members or caregivers, 33% of traffickers come from that group. Intimate partners, 28%. Employers, 22%. So that's a huge number. I mean, think about that. Someone that you know. Then there's the Romeo scenario, one of the most common tactics out there with traffickers, posing as that romantic partner, showering that victim with gifts and attention before they gradually isolate them and then control them. But what makes them vulnerable? Well, for recent migration or relocation is 54% of victims. So migrants that come from different countries, 54% of the victims. Substance use issues, mental health concerns, involvement with child welfare system, a runaway or a homeless youth that might be escaping something even they thought was bad and going to something worse, or an economic hardship. So the types of trafficking are labor trafficking, which is 43% of all trafficking cases globally. They occur on farms, factories, restaurants, hotels, and construction. So just think about that. When you're out and about, you go to a restaurant or a hotel, there could very well be trafficked people working there. Victims are forced to work excessive hours without proper pay. They often involves debt bondage and document confiscation. Ugh, that word didn't trip, did it? The sex trafficking. Doc's laughing at me because he knows my words trip. But sex trafficking, any minor under 18 in commercial sex, that's trafficking. I don't care if they went willingly, it's trafficking. They cannot consent. Adults coerced through force, fraud, or manipulation, that can involve escort services, massage parlors, nail salons, strip clubs, online platforms. They post pictures of these victims and make dates for them that they can't turn down. I mean, that's how they found Natalie. They had put her on a website. And also there's forced criminality is becoming a big trend. 8% of detective cases in 2022, up from 1% in 2016, victims were forced to commit crimes like cyber scams, theft, drug trafficking, because that also gives you something to hold over them. It creates that secondary victim while the original victim faces criminal charges, because that way if they get caught, that's on them. The warning signs everyone needs to look for: physical indicators, malnourished, sleep-deprived appearance, unexplained injuries or bruises, signs of physical restraint. Tattoos are a huge one, you guys. These traffickers like to tattoo their property. Dollar signs, names, crowns, gang symbols. That was one thing those dudes that came over from, now listen, I can't even remember their last name, but they were the ones that came over from Bulgaria, that they were allowed into the country, and they were over there, Romania, and they were being held for trafficking. Well, they like to brand their girls, put tattoos on them, put their name. Yeah. Stand up, guys. Multiple cell phones, expensive items inconsistent with income. They don't have, any money, and all of a sudden they have all these expensive items coming in. Some red flags in their behavior. Are they fearful? Are they anxious? Or all of a sudden submissive? Someone else always speaks for them. They have a scripted response to any question. They avoid eye contact with you. They fear law enforcement. They're not familiar with the neighborhood despite living in it. So maybe they ask you for directions and you've seen them in there before. Sudden dramatic behavioral changes. Child stops attending school. Appears coached on what to say. Shows deference to controlling figure. Secretive about their online activity or relationships. They refer to an older boyfriend, sponsor, daddy. They are using traffic-specific terminology. Daddy was one of them, which is gross. They talk about dates, and it can be commercial sex encounters because that's what they call them. They're making dates. Mentioning family or folks when they're talking about the other trafficked victims, using terms like choosing up or turned out or automatic, quota, the money requirements, exit fees if they're trying to buy their way out. So the special consideration for male may be dismissive as gay rather than trafficked, assumed to be in control of their situation. Less likely to be seen as a victim. Because a lot of times they'll say, well, are they weak? It's man. He can walk away. But it involves survival sex, trading sex for food, shelter, or necessities. And sometimes these guys do not have a choice. They get put in situations that they have to be in. And a little bit later, we're going to talk about a place here in Texas that was the very first safe house for boys to come to. And before that, there was none. And I was listening to an interview, and the one young man was trying to tell his story, and he just couldn't. And the reporter was so great. She told him, that's fine. Thank you for speaking with me. And, he was just, it really messed him up. And he'll be messed up. All of these trafficked children and adults will be messed up for life, you guys. This isn't something they get over. There's special consideration for the LGBTQ community and the two-spirit victims. They're often dismissed as choosing sex rather than being trafficked. They chose to do it. And it's embarrassing if they're heterosexual and they're having to not have heterosexual sex. They face discrimination in the shelters. Most are separated by binary gender, excluding transgender victims, and especially now because NamUs and missing children, they're taking that option down to put down that they're transgender. So they're placing them in whatever category they were born as. So if someone's looking for, let's say, a girl that now identifies as a boy, and you have some girl named Elizabeth you're looking for, and she's going by Bob, what's the chance they're going to find her? They're not. So, and they're not going to report because they're scared of the family, the community. So vulnerable to the promise. Some of them are promised hormone therapy. Some are gender affirming care from their traffickers. The two-spirit victims may face both discrimination and racism because they're Indian and they're also transgender. They may be targeted for corrective violence meant to fix their identity. So circumstantial signs, no control over their ID, excessive cash without obvious employment. Their stories aren't adding up. Are they living with a bunch of people? We had that here in Texas where they were finding houses What's wrong, Rogue? Rogue wanted to say hi, everybody. They found a bunch of people that had been trafficked, and they were all in a home. And the doors, of course, were locked, but there was a lot of people in there. They have lack of personal possessions. They're restricted freedom of movement. They disconnect from family and friends. And that's another thing with the teen. Do they all of a sudden drop their social group? Sadly, that's something you have to watch out for. William's got girls, and he knows how girls love their social group. If all of a sudden they no longer have anything to do with them, that's scary. So the psychological aspect, you have the Stockholm syndrome and trauma bonding. So victims don't always want to be rescued because trauma bonding creates the psychological attachments to the abusers. And that may be what happened to Natalie. She says, I don't know why I didn't call out. Because the trauma bonding can get them attached to that abuser. They're feeding them drugs to keep them there. At times they do the love bombing where, oh, we care about you. Yeah, Tracy, you're right. Victims can become the abuser too. They can abuse others. And that can happen in this situation. And some of them do become traffickers. And they say there are a lot of women that are traffickers. We always think of it as a male dominant thing. But recently we've had some female traffickers that have been arrested. There actually was a native girl who was arrested and pled guilty because she had trafficked a teen to some old dude. Rogue is making her name known. But also there was a Chinese woman that was running a brothel. So she had trafficked all these women. So it does happen. And it's really sad because it becomes a way to survive. It's their way of survival, and you can't judge them for that. And they may even defend their traffickers, because the basic kindness that trafficker shows them, because one might be meaner than the other, let's say, any kindness, they're going to take it as, well, they do care, and they don't. You make money for them. That's all. They also have the fear of the unknown, the abuse, shame, self-blame, prevent help seeking. Yeah. Well, and that makes sense, Tracy, if she was abused for that long and she wanted her own money. Yeah. So you get put in a situation and you think, well, maybe this is my way out. And that happens with some trafficked women that eventually they might get past what the trafficker considers their buy date, but they go on to continue in prostitution because that's what they know and they need money. So we have to think about that. So these people are not always going to be looking for help. Now with Natalie, she said when the police officer happened to pull up beside her and he goes, "Are you Natalie Cramer?" And she says, "Yes, I am." So she said she had been praying, someone help me. And the policeman pulled up and he was able to help her. But that doesn't always happen, sadly. And we got to think about that. So the brain's survival mechanism is when our survival is threatened, our primal drive is to do whatever it takes to stay alive, you guys, even if that means bonding with the abuser. The mental health crisis, what trafficking does to the mind, staggering statistics. 98% of trafficking survivors have at least one diagnosable mental illness. 71% experience depression. 78% PTSD. 41% have attempted self-deletion. Mental health care was the number one need survivors reported. Common mental health impacts the post-traumatic stress disorder. Because just like someone in the military, they have flashbacks and nightmares. They're hypervigilant and fear responses. They avoid trauma reminders, disassociate and detach. They have feelings of hopelessness and worthlessness. And I think for a lot of young people, that feeling of hopelessness and worthlessness because of the things you've had to do, yeah, that would be huge. sleep disturbances because they're always vigilant, they're not sleeping well, loss of interest in life, high rates of deletion attempts, substance use disorders, because that's how a lot of them are controlled. So they can create this dependency that outlasts the trafficking. So once they're no longer trafficked, they still have an addiction they have to deal with. Barriers to accessing services and employment, complications, recovery process, dissociative identity disorder, memory loss, identity confusion. So there is so much that they go through. It's just the self-worth destruction. One survivor said, "I was bartered for a tank of gas, a 6-pack of beer, and some cigarettes." This transactional view of human worth becomes internalized. How do you think she felt? That that's all she was worth? Yeah, Sarah, yeah, I'm sure she was in a mental hospital for 6 months. And they do. They'll start out with something small and just, or sometimes go right for the big stuff. Ketamine is a huge one that they'll use. Methamphetamines, whatever they have, they will get them hooked. And then they get relationship trauma because they don't have the ability to trust people anymore. They have attachment wounds affecting any relationship. People pleasing, they try, or complete avoidance of people. And they have the fear of connection and intimacy. So the Native American community, these devastating statistics, because these women are 4 times more likely to be trafficked than any other ethnic group. In Minneapolis, 25% of prostitution arrests were Native women. They're only 2.2% of the population up there, but 25% of the arrests were them. In Anchorage, 33% of prostitution arrests were Alaskan Native women, with only 7.9% being of the population. In Hawaii, 45% of trafficking victims are Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islanders, despite being a minority group. 71% of trafficking victims, like I told you, under 18 or 19. 46.8% of Hawaiian cases involve commercial sexual exploitation. So, we have to stop and think the exploitation for the natives actually dates back to Columbus in 1492, because he provided indigenous women and girls to his crew, and he had tolerated rape and atrocities toward these women. And it became an intergenerational trauma. You have the boarding schools, and one of these days we'll do a whole thing on the boarding schools, where women from families functioned by forced assimilation make up the majority of Native trafficking victims. They were forced to lose their identity as natives. The boys had their hair cut. They were put in colonized clothing. They weren't allowed to wear anything native. They weren't allowed to speak their language. Think about that. That's why so many of some of these native and indigenous languages are being lost, because they were abused if they spoke their native language. They were also sexually assaulted in these schools. And the interesting thing to me was them when World War II came around and they needed the code breakers, they went to one of these schools and were asking these guys if they could speak the Navajo language. Now, these guys had been beaten for speaking the language, but all of a sudden they had a use for it. Let that sink in. So they became useful then. So the cultural disconnection increases their vulnerability. As one survivor says, "Back then I was not connected to my cultural identity. I thought prostitution was a normal living." When a Native woman goes missing, she disappears twice, like I said earlier, once in life and once in the news, because they're not in the news. The pattern extends across all Indigenous communities: Native Americans, Alaskan Natives, First Nation in Canada, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, all share show disproportionate victimization. The continuation of colonial tactics, the current trafficking is almost indistinguishable from colonial tactics of enslavement and exploitation, you guys. The missing and murdered Indigenous women crisis, it is still going strong. It is a genocide of the Native and Indigenous people. 84.3% of Indigenous women have experienced violence in their lifetime. Now, there is a lot of violence even within their own community. And I'm not trying to say that it's all from outside the community, but there is a lot of it on the outside. Over 5,000 Native American women go missing annually. Over 5,000. That's talking the U.S. That's not even including the First Nations. Only 60% of these cases are even entered into a missing person database. Because not all these states even have it as a law that they need to be put in there. There's a lot of states that don't even bother making it a requirement. So like when I'm looking to check up on updates, like you see a missing flyer on a Native girl and you're looking for an update, it's hard to find. It's the families and people like, Lissa Yellowbird Chase and some of these other groups that are out there shouting and saying you have to pay attention to the missing and murdered Indigenous people. If they didn't, nobody would know. Sadly, there are cartels that are doing the boyfriend thing where they're moving into some of these reservations, dating or marrying because they want access to the reservation. Now, some of these reservations are huge. That's a lot of land, especially up north on close to that Canadian border. Even down south, some of the reservations are huge. The Navajo reservation. So they want to be able to have a reason to be on the reservation. Sometimes they get these kids hooked. They get them to sell the drugs for them. It's a vicious cycle. So the movement with the Two-Spirit people, they face even the higher rate of violence. They all get recognized as being runaways and prostitutes instead of victims. And the family circumstances are preventing cultural education. Urban living has created a barrier to traditional practices that they have because there are reservations that have lost their land because they had a thing back in, I think it was the 60s or 70s, where they actually got a lot of the people to leave the reservations for work, and then they took their land because there wasn't that many people. So, yeah. And you can see why the Native people would not trust law enforcement, because the government has not been kind to them. So, shame from the exploitation creates feelings of unworthiness. The healing power of cultural reconnection does help. In fact, there is a Native judge out in California who actually has helped set up even the system for people that are going through the judicial system on the reservation to get help from natural therapies and healing and to help them with their addictions. And it's showing a success. So 1/3 of survivors credit their Native spiritual practices with helping them to escape. The sweat lodges, the smudging provide healing. Children become bridges back to their culture. They're learning about their culture. The traditional healing is often more effective than even conventional healing. So cultural identity is viewed as an essential survival tool. One survivor said, "A John said to me, 'I thought we killed all of you.'" And that wasn't ancient history speaking. This was in 2023. So can you imagine how she felt? That would just break your heart. The legal system's response, challenges in prosecution. Victims often seen as criminals rather than the victim. Children charged with prostitution, despite the inability to consent. When are they going to go after the men that are paying for it? I know that's not always the answer, but I think it's a huge part of the answer. Language barriers, fear prevent cooperation. A huge thing, you guys, is the judicial issues on tribal land. So many of the tribal lands do not have the right to arrest anyone who is not native if they commit a crime on a reservation that is their sovereign land. That is insane. So basically, you're telling me this is my land. I have it here, but I don't have the authority to do anything with it. And then you have the federal government, who is supposed to do something, but they don't always participate. And then you have the local authorities that say, well, go to the tribal police. I mean, Lissa gave us that example when she knew where that one woman who had been murdered was. She called 911 and they said, well, you need to talk to the tribal police. She's like, well, the tribal police aren't talking to me. They're not listening. I know where she's at. So she had to have her Caucasian friend use her name for 911 to come out there. I mean, this is ridiculous. So they do have some safe harbor laws protecting minors. I mean, when we think of Emily Pike, we found out she had been raped twice. So see, she is one of these victims. So trafficking survivors act for conviction. They specialize in courts and training for law enforcement. These are the things that need to happen. You know, they need to have more programs to help the survivors. You know, law enforcement and professionals need to know the red flags. Honey, I don't know, Sarah, but you're right. Just recently, a few of the native kids ran off together. They found the one girl and boy who had run off together, and then they have a couple of girls they're looking for. You know, I don't know why they think that's a good idea. You know, they're also, you know, kids won't tell the truth about their employment or their living situation. They have that fear of what's going to happen to them. So there's a lot of things we have to think about how they get re-traumatized through interrogation tactics, you know. I get asked if I feel safe at home when I break an ankle walking. Oh, fella. I can remember I think I was 5 and I told my mom I was going to run away. I was mad about something. And I got a suitcase out and all of a sudden my mother came in there and Mama started packing my suitcase and I started taking things out. It was like, no. She says, well, I thought you were leaving. I said, no. So she did that reverse psychology on me, and that was my one and only time I did that. I think I was 5. She taught me. I learned. And also, when we talk about trafficking, the economic scale, billions in profits, you guys. And then that's connected to money laundering, drug trafficking. They use legitimate businesses as fronts, massage parlors, nail salons. Technology increasingly is used. That's why we see so many kids are getting connected through their devices. Financial red flags are their unusual cash transactions, multiple bank accounts, money transfers to and from high-risk areas, business models that don't make economic sense. So these are all things that they need to be checking. But the social media platforms where these traffickers pose as, you know, romantic interests, you know, they tell them, oh, you're so mature for your age. Yeah, no, they're not. And every parent, you do need to get yourself a kit. You need to get your child's DNA. You need to get their fingerprints. You know what? You don't want to scare them. Do it as a family. Mom and dad, do yours too. Everybody do it. And that way the child will think, well, this is just something we're doing in case something, you know, if someone goes missing. Or it can be, what if you get in an accident and I don't know where you are, you know? you come up with something to tell them so they're not scared. But make sure you're taking the boys too, because it's not always the girls that get taken. We have to protect the boys. Then there's the dating apps by underage users that they're using. You gotta know what these kids are doing. And if you don't understand some of the platforms, ask your friends, ask the school. Oh, Matt, your mother was gonna call the orphanage. Oh, that was mean. Yeah, you're right, Sarah. It's all apps. It's, Facebook, Instagram, the gaming, that's why you tell the boys that little girls are the devil. Oh, that's what you did there, Tracy? You told your boys that the girls were the devil? Yeah, I could see Tracy doing that, you guys. She's ornery. Yes, you're right. Snap, Kicks, Fortnite. Even, what's that one, Roblox or something that's for little kids? Yeah, they're getting in through there. We've had several here in Texas of these young girls, like 12 years old, going out to meet people and not coming back. Yes, I know you sent your son to military school. She was a tough mom, but she had to do something. And you got to do what you got to do. So, but parents, you need to know, the one girl that's in the news now that she has disappeared, Elisa, I'm going to do something on her case. She was using an old iPad that her parent, or a tablet of some kind that her parents didn't know she had. That's how she was contacting. I think they said they have up to 3 guys, adult men, she was contacting. So why on earth, some girl is doing that kind of nonsense? So that's something to think about. If you have an old tablet, do you know where it is? Could your child have access to it? I am a big proponent on never take their phone away from them. But if you have to give them some discipline, have a flip phone, or, like one of those that they use for older people, the jitterbug that doesn't have all the bells and whistles. Make them get away from their phone that has all the bells and whistles and go to something like that so that they can at least be in contact. Because we've heard stories where the child leaves the house and then all of a sudden, nothing. Oh, William, I would have been scared too. Yes. Why is he messaging a 12-year-old? You know what? I think I would call that into the FBI. I really would. I would contact the human trafficking and report that. If the locals didn't do anything about it, because they might be able to look up this dude's digital information, and your daughter might not have been the first. So I definitely would. I told Doc, I'm not scared that I'm going to be trafficked. I'm a little past my prime, as Tracy likes to remind me. But anyway, lately I have had 2 situations on Next Door Neighbor. If you know what Next Door Neighbor is, it's a place that people go to, sell things, or if they've lost their dog, or things like that. Well, I always, look at the lost dogs, lost cats. We'll post stuff. We've sold a couple of things, nothing real major. But lately I've been posting when I get an alert on a sexual predator in the area, And so last time some dude contacted me when I mentioned something about a pet. And he was like, "Can I get your phone number?" And I'm like, "No, my husband doesn't like me to give my phone number out to men I don't know." "Well, I thought we could get acquainted." I said, "No, my husband's not interested in that." And then this time, it was after I sent out a predator alert. The guy yesterday called, text, DM me, and, was like, "Hi, how are you?" And I said, "Fine." And then he asked me, "Could we exchange numbers?" I told him again, "Nope, I'm married. My husband didn't like me doing that." So it was just, I thought, next door neighbor. I mean, I've heard of this on Facebook and other platforms. They're now going through next door neighbor. It's like, what is wrong with these people?
You find the bottom feeders everywhere.
I mean, it's like,
So,
dude, you must be bored at home. I mean, yes, I am a woman. I am not desperate. Go away. I have my doc. I don't need anybody else. But, so check out your kids' platforms, their social media. Find out what's going on. Because one of the guys told me, I said, well, he just kept like, "Oh, I'm just trying to get acquainted with people." And he was playing this game with me. So I played along and I said, "Do you have a Facebook page?" "Oh, yeah." So I went to the Facebook page and I took a photo, a screenshot of the photo he put up. Well, number one, he had just opened the Facebook page. And I went to an app that you can put a photo in and it will look all over the internet to try and match it. It was an Asian actor. So then the next time he contacted me, I said, "Why are you using a fake picture of an Asian actor?" Which I don't think he thought I would find out. And he's like, I really like him. Maybe you should contact him. Maybe he'll be your friend." Yeah, so that was a weird experience. So watch out for next door neighbor. There's some freaks flying their flags over there. It's just insane, people. But some of the things I think we already talked about that. Oh, sudden changes in your child's dress or behavior, meeting online friends in person. Do you know there is a huge percentage of kids that will tell you their best friend is online? Now that's scary. If your kid's saying that, I would be checking into it. Because their best friend should not be online. Yeah, missing person. Well, that's good, William, Matt. Yeah, we need to. We need to try and find these people. And that's the thing with trafficked victims. They're everywhere. Kids don't hang out in real life. That's sad. That is really sad. I thought kids did. But let's see here. So here's some national numbers for National Human Trafficking Hotline. 1-888-373-7888. Or text BEFREE, be free, 233-733.
and I'll put these numbers down in the description. So
yeah. 24/7 confidential line for Canada. We have it 1-883-900-1010. And that's their trafficking hotline. You can always go to local law enforcement, call 911. If they don't do anything like they did with William because the guy didn't do anything, I would still contact the feds. I would contact the human trafficking hotline and just say you have a concern that nobody took it seriously and you're worried he could be reaching out to other children that perhaps their parents aren't paying attention. Yeah, Sarah's kids, 18, 20, 22, they had friends. Well, it's something you have to worry about now with the new generation, I guess. But so we have a call to action, you guys. As true crime enthusiasts, we got to recognize the signs in cases that we follow, educate others about the realities and the myths. So if you hear someone say something stupid like, well, men can't be trafficked, yeah, they can. Support survivors organizations like Ranch Hand Rescue and Bob's House of Hope, which was the first safe house for boys. This guy was amazing. He's here in Texas, and I heard him interviewed, and he actually started with a rescue for animals that had disabilities. I think he said he had like a dog that has 3 legs, and they got it a prosthesis. Boy, that didn't come out very well, did it? Okay. But then because he had been trafficked as a young guy, he decided to start reaching out and seeing about maybe helping young men. And so he's amazing. And so Bob's House of Hope, these are some of the places, if you want to check out and see if they're worthy of donating, or just advocate for them. Let them know. Let other people know that there are places out there. Advocate for better training for law enforcement and legal professionals. My 26-year-old hung out with friends all the time. My 21-year-old son plays games with friends online when he can meet them. Yeah, kids are weird. It happens. But as far as like Dallas and the Fort Worth police, look on Facebook. If they have any place on there, send a Facebook message that you don't care for how they handled Natalie's case or how they're handling Sarah's case. Her mother, their parents are both being kind. I'd be screaming from the rooftop, what's wrong with you guys? Get off your bums and do your jobs. These girls were minors, and they, Dallas was kind of like, well, go to your hometown and report her. Don't do it here where she was taken and where she probably was still in the area. And then as far as Sarah, well, she's a runaway. She's 17. She's an adult runaway. No, she's not. She's a child. Monitor our children online. Sarah doesn't have to worry about her grandchildren yet. They're still a little, but before long as they get older, yeah. Make sure that that's checked out, because they use, the traffickers and the predators, dudes, they are good with technology, freaks. Have a conversation with your teens about online safety and the reality of trafficking recruitment. Do it at what age is appropriate. Let them know. I remember when they did the Stranger Danger campaign, they actually said it was one of the worst campaigns because a lot of abuse happens from people they know. I mean, that doesn't mean it doesn't happen with strangers. We know that does happen. But even with sex trafficking, sometimes it's somebody in your circle, or, someone attached to the family that is actually trafficking these people. And the thing when people say, well, you can't be trafficked if they're still living at home. Yeah, they can still be being put in that position. That's why you have to look for all those other signs we talked about tonight. Like Eva's story. When she was 13, the little native girl, she was being trafficked and living at home, but that boyfriend had control over her. But she hit all the signs. So look for those signs. Share digital safety resources with parents, teachers, and youth organizations. If you have conversations with friends and they don't understand some of the technology, help them. Or see if they can help you. Support the murdered, missing murdered Indigenous women's movement. Also, Alyssa told me it's called, where they're at in the north, they call it MMEIR, which is Missing Murdered Exploited Indigenous Relatives, because they want to include everybody. So stand up and demand justice for these people that are missing and murdered, and nobody is doing anything. Challenge the media bias. Notice when missing Indigenous people are going missing and the coverage that a missing white person gets compared to someone that's Indigenous. Advocate for specialized services for the LGBTQ community or the two-spirit trafficking victims. Parents and educators, which William falls into both categories, know what platforms your children use and understand privacy settings. Look for the warning signs online predator behavior. I'm so glad, William, that you were able to catch that dude trying to get a hold of your 12-year-old. Create safe spaces for children to report uncomfortable online interactions. Don't make it weird for them. Let them know, hey, it's okay. You can talk to me about anything. That's what I'm here for. But each time we share a story of the missing Indigenous people, we resist the system that seeks to make them disappear twice. Utilize your platforms, everybody. As a true crime enthusiast, to ensure their voices are heard, get the information out there. Send them back to our channel here that we're all part of, because you're all part of our community. Let them become part of the trial junkies and justice warriors who are seeking the truth. Eva's story isn't over. Lakota's murder remains unsolved. Sara Martinez is still missing. Thousands of Indigenous people continue to disappear into a system that is designed to ignore them. Human trafficking isn't just a crime that happens to other people in other places. It's the continuation of a 500-year-old system of exploitation that began with Columbus. He first set foot on Indigenous land, and they should have shooed him away. But every time we dismiss a Native woman as a runaway or a prostitute, we're part of that colonial violence. We're saying it's okay. But the MMI movement reminds us that Indigenous people are disappearing twice, not just when they vanish, but when the stories are totally ignored, you guys. So as true crime enthusiasts, we have the power to break the cycle by amplifying, I'm thirsty. Amplifying these voices and demanding justice. Yes. Well, yeah, being a teacher, I'm sure you see stuff in school. It needs to be told too. I mean, look what happened with Angry Cop in the Unsub podcast. That school that was allowing predators into the school. Night, fella. We'll see you tomorrow, honey. So as one survivor said, we didn't wake up and choose this life. We need someone to understand. We need people with hearts. So the first step in fighting this ancient crime is seeing these people. They're human beings. They deserve justice. They're not statistics in a report. Nobody should ever have to say, nobody saw me again. So these stories matter. I just can't. This is really what I'm focused on. I got to get these stories out. But let's talk about the missing people we have. The first one we have tonight is Martin. He was last seen near his residence in Fond du Lac Reservation in Wisconsin on March 8th of 2024. On the day of his disappearance, he borrowed $40 from a friend, promising to pay her back within 8 hours and offering an iPhone as collateral for the loan. Hours later, Martin responded to his friend's Facebook message saying he was waiting for a ride to town so he could cash a check. He has never been heard from again. On March 9th, the mother of Martin's child stopped by his home on Rustic Lane for a custody exchange and found the door open and called the police. When police went to Martin's house for a welfare check, they noticed the television was smashed, there were holes in the wall, and spots of blood throughout the house, and Martin's driver's license and his tribal ID card were left behind. He was reported missing on March 11th. Days later, police found a black t-shirt and black sweatpants with an iPhone in the pocket on Ginwinnie Road in the woods nearby. Hanging from a tree was a black jacket with a white Samsung Galaxy 6 phone in the pocket. Both phones belonged to Martin. Martin's loved ones stated that despite he did have a drug problem, he was not the sort of person to leave home without telling everybody. His case is unsolved. His disappearance is considered suspicious. And Fond du Lac Police Department, 218-878-8040. St. Louis Dispatch, 218-749-6100. So let's see if we can get some answers for Martin's family. He's 33. He's 5'10", 165 pounds. Medical condition, he had a drug addiction. So these are things to think about. He had brown hair, brown eyes, scar on his forehead, tattoos on his chest, both arms, including a cross on his bicep. Photos of some of the tattoos are posted with this case summary. He is a registered member of the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. His ears are pierced. Next, we have Isabel Sofia Diaz. Now, with her, we are advised by the officer who took the report to call 911. And we also know it wasn't exactly helpful for someone who had called recently. So I guess the officer wasn't real helpful. She's 17. She was last seen wearing a white shirt and black shorts. She's 5'3", 125 pounds. She's still missing. Call 911. There's a case number on the bottom of her flyer. She needs to be found. They also put out the warning that we have to show up for the community and keep a law enforcement to do the same. This also protects you as a citizen, as helping a runaway can be a crime. So they're saying if anybody is harboring her or giving her shelter without the consent of a parent or guardian, it's illegal in Texas. And you can get fined or jail time. So something to think about. Sophia Swan, May 9th, 2025, last time she was seen. She's from Rapid City, South Dakota. 14, Native American, brown eyes, brown hair, 5'2", 120 pounds. They want information on Sophia. The Rapid City Department, 605-394-4131. Or call your local police department if you happen to see her, because we don't know. Yvette Montero was last seen on May 10th at approximately 7:30 p.m. in Sackton, Arizona. She was wearing a black shirt with, triple tenacious picture on the front. Must be a rapper. I don't know. Gray sweatpants and black slides with black socks. She had a gold-colored necklace. If you have any information, don't hesitate to contact the Gila River Police Department, 520-562-4511, or call 911. So these were our missing people. 15 years old. That just breaks your heart. So I thank you all for coming. Every trafficker, every system that ignores our Indigenous people relies on our silence. Don't be why another Native person disappears twice, once in life and once in the news. If you know something, speak up, because that isn't just a troubled teen. There's someone's daughter or son, someone's sacred relative. So until next time, stay informed and compassionate, and remember, missing and murdered Indigenous women or relatives, they matter. We need to seek justice. And I appreciate you guys for being with us tonight. I know we ran kind of long. Sorry about that, but this was an important one because Sara Martinez, I'm worried about her, and I know her family is too. So let's get the word out there. And I love you all, and I'll see you Sunday. If anyone has a suggestion for the Sunday's case, let me know. Did you like the format we did last Sunday if you were part of it, where we just kind of hit a bunch of different cases? Whatever you guys would like. Oh, thank you, Sarah, William, Matt. Yeah, we'll have a good night, and you guys all have a good night too. And on Discord, let's chat, because I want to start my own Discord. I want to start a Discord where we start looking for some of the missing, that we get some information out there. So if anyone's kind of interested in that, let me know. If anyone has any investigative skills, let me know. I'll see you tomorrow, Tracy. And we'll argue over the Max Anderson case, because he is guilty, even though you won't admit it. She wants to see all the evidence. If she was on a jury, you guys, I'm sorry. I would strangle Tracy, and then we'd have another trial, because she would be a pain on a jury. I love her. She'd be a pain on a jury. So Tracy, tell Bigfoot I said hi. I love you all. William, great. We'll get on Discord and chat, because I really do want to set something up. Love you guys, and we'll see you next time. Sunday night, 8 p.m. Ciao.